Jonna Gerken, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Chad. Great to be here.
Yeah, good to have you on. So, context is always a really great way to start these conversations. And people understand your background, and they understand context for the rest of everything else that we're going to talk about. So, can you talk a little bit about what you're doing right now, where you're at, what your responsibilities are, that kind of business?
Sure. Currently, I am a fellow in project engineering, which is one of our disciplines at Pratt Whitney, and I'm supporting our controls diagnostic systems organization and power thermal management. So our software and engine controls department.
Okay, very cool. So I'd love to hear about how you got there, like what your origin story is. Like, was this something you always wanted to get into? Was it a long dream of yours, or and what was the path to get there?
So it's been kind of a circuitous path over my close to 30 years of experience in the aerospace and defense industry. I started at another company, not unusual anymore for folks to bounce around between companies, but I have to say, I've spent the last 26 of that 30 at Pratt Whitney. So I'm not one to jump companies, but I certainly have had a plethora of different roles while I've been there. So, just sticking with Pratt, and along with my original company, right? I started out in the shop floor as a manufacturing engineer. My degree's in industrial engineering. So no better place to learn how to be an industrial engineer than the shop floor, where, you watch parts being made, you see the good and the bad and the ugly, and figure out how to make it better. So, spent several years on the floor at both jobs. And then, realized, I don't mind being on the shop floor, but it is not the most convenient from many standpoints. It was a little dirty at the time. It's gotten much cleaner now, but it's a different lifestyle. It's a different schedule, a different set of expectations, and I wanted to try something different, and was able to move over to one of our engineering departments, and found a really great opportunity in what is called project engineering, which in college you don't really learn about. It's something that everyone learns once they become an engineer or working in an engineering organization, but you don't actually know it until you get there. So this whole world of project engineering, project management, program management was really a good fit for what I enjoy doing, which is, leading teams, staying organized, getting things done, or helping a team get things done. Because I knew I was never going to be the person doing the detailed work, the design work. As much as I loved it, industrial engineering and factory design and, changing things around, there's not as many opportunities to do that in general versus running projects. So the opportunity was there and I took it. And I've basically been doing that ever since, from various different aspects of the organization, whether it's leading teams or business process improvements, or being on the program side and being the recipient of the information and, pushing for better and faster, or, now being a fellow where I help train and grow our discipline for the next, generation of practitioners.
That's great. Awesome. Really great stuff. Now, I know that you talked about kind of bringing along the next generation, but something I think it's really important to share with listeners is you've been involved with mentoring early career engineers for a while, right? Can you talk a little bit about that as well?
Yeah, that's an important part of my career development, has been being both a mentee and a mentor at various levels. I love mentoring others. I love seeing my mentees be successful and grow, and watch them succeed in all places, whether in the organization or outside. It's important because there's a lot of things that you don't learn in school. There's a lot of things that you learn the hard way, and you shouldn't have to, right? There should be someone to bounce ideas against, or to get some advice, whether it's a professional situation, an interpersonal situation, or what have you. And I actually do find some of the most valuable mentoring to be peer-to-peer, folks that I am colleagues with, because we have shared experiences that we can work together with, rather than that whole hierarchical mentor-mentee where somebody's higher than another, which sometimes is awkward, and maybe not as open flowing of a communication as you can have with a peer.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great stuff. And also, while we're touching on it, I've been hearing more and more about reverse mentorship, and maybe that implies the wrong thing there, but people that may be earlier in their career, but maybe more familiar with, we are in the era of disruptive technologies. AI is changing a lot of things nowadays. Maybe they're more familiar with AI, and they're mentoring folks that may be later in their career. Would love to get your perspective on that real quick. If you're seeing that, is it successful? What's your perspective there?
I, I love any opportunity to give or receive help. So yeah, the younger generation does bring a lot of great value to a mentoring relationship. And even as a mentor, I'm always learning something from whoever I'm talking to, because I may be giving them advice based on my experience and history or how I dealt with something, but the questions they ask do open up or allude to the things that they're thinking differently. And I can maybe push on that and say, well, why did you say that? Or why do you think that? Because then I'm going to learn a little bit about it. Not just I'll say the tools and the, different apps and softwares and things, but just the way they're thinking. What have they learned in school? Do they have a different perspective that I need to maybe adjust for? Because everyone's situation is different. So I don't want to assume that the way I dealt with something is exactly the same way someone else is going to deal with it.
That's great. Yeah, and I think there is so much to learn back and forth. With people at all stages of their careers. So
Right.
I think that's really really valuable. Let's
And change is hard. Right? Change is hard. If you want to learn, you gotta sometimes
yes.
hear the hard truths and realize that maybe you didn't have a right reaction or decision.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, no, that's great. And boy, that's great timing you bring that up, because I want to shift gears and talk about change initiatives, change agents. I think a good baseline. I always ask this question. In your mind, what is a change agent? And that kind of sets us up for the rest of this conversation. So, in your mind, what is a change agent?
To me, I'd say a change agent is somebody who has an open mind, who is willing to learn and grow, and has the ability to influence others, without authority, and has a good network, maybe, who can pull on the right people. That I don't, every change agent doesn't necessarily have to be an early adopter, but they certainly need to know who those people are and pull in the right resources in order to make things happen and be able to follow through, because it's easy to say we're all just going to suddenly do it a new way, but then what? Right? Who's going to make sure things are happening? And is it been implemented so that the change is sustainable? We need somebody who's really able to kind of think about that whole process and know when to bring in the right people at each stage.
Yeah. No, that totally makes sense. And you mentioned a few things that caught my ear there. Being able to kind of influence without direct, I guess, a direct organizational structure is one thing. But I'm curious to hear from you. What are some of the big factors or range of factors that contribute to a change agent being successful? What comes to mind when I say that?
Well, certainly, base from a basic level, right? Somebody's got to be organized. Nothing drives me more nuts than folks who love to jump in and do things, but are totally disorganized. And that's probably the IE in me coming through, because it's important that you have the information organized and well and to follow, because the worst thing is to have these great plans that everyone agrees to, but nobody knows what you agreed to because you either didn't write it down or it's not documented properly. It's not in a place where people can find it. So like that's to me is like a non-starter, right? You got a basic, level. But um, you know, skill wise, I mean, anybody could be a change agent. I think it's more about attitude and being wanting to really having the passion for it and saying this, I really believe in this. It's really hard when you don't believe in the thing you're trying to change. So, believing in what you're trying to change, having that passion, and then, wanting to stick it through, right? It's easy to say, I'm on board, rah, rah, and then go up and do other things. But you need that person, right, who's going to drive that change and run it all the way through.
Makes sense. Yeah, absolutely. Um, from well, number two, something I skipped there is, are you a change agent? I think I know the answer, but I want to hear from you.
I mean, I try to be. I try to be. I mean, there's certain times where I've had an actual, right, my goal was to change something, right? Certainly that has in past has been my goal, and mostly business processes. I spent most of my last part of my career in business process improvement. So those are a lot harder changes to implement because it's not, necessarily a black and white on or off. This is a process that touches a lot of people, a lot of organizations. You might put out new documents. There's nothing, you have to figure out how to either force people to use the new ones or show them why it's a better option than what they've been doing in the past. And habits are really hard to break when folks do the same thing every day or use the same process and standards throughout their career. It's hard to get them to change. So that's sometimes I have to do that. Other times I'm kind of in that other role of I'm participating on the team. Maybe I'm gung ho because I really am passionate about it, or it's just something that fits in my overall scope. And so sometimes it's me just kind of pushing and helping the actual perceived change agent, the leader, and giving them kind of the backdoor advice and support.
Yeah. Okay. Makes sense. Totally makes sense. Well, good. I think that's a yes overall.
Oh
You
yeah,
are.
but differently. Yes, in different ways.
Yes, in different ways. Absolutely. Um, so follow up to that. What do you find most satisfying or fulfilling as a change agent? Like, what do you really enjoy about it?
Seeing the benefits, right, of all the work that you've done and seeing people really understand that as however long and painful it was to get to where you were, that it was for a good reason and it does help them, right? Because kind of going back to my IE background, right? Our mantra is better, faster, cheaper. So anything we can do to make that work easier or better for the end user, whether it's an internal customer or external, right? That's the goal. And, changes are meant to make things better. We don't change things to make them worse. I hope. I hope we don't. But we are changing to make things better, right? In whatever way it is, whatever the metric is, seeing that implemented and really being successful and seeing people feel the benefit of it. I'm concerned about the actual metrics, right? Whether we saved money or whatever, but seeing it help the day-to-day person, like that's what I really want to see. I want to see that you're no longer doing non-valuated work, right? You're no longer wasting time or energy. You're no longer, spending all that unnecessary, time and work when you could be doing, better things. So that's what I want to see.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. All that makes sense. Yeah, and yeah, understanding how you can impact and improve things obviously is a big hit there. Um, across these podcasts, we talked with a lot of different change agents. Some of them kind of take on that responsibility themselves. Some of them are voluntold to go lead a change initiative. And I'm curious, I'd like to hear from you. What do you think are some signs that you set up for success? And what are some signs that, hey, maybe you need to go back and get realigned with an executive manager that asks you to go take something on? Any kind of guidance, for people that are listening or watching, and they've been approached about leading a new change, they're trying to figure out, okay, is this a good idea or not? What would you tell them? Like, what are signs one way or the other that it's going to work out?
Um, I'll say in the parlance of project management, right? Planning, planning, planning. So having having a very clear set of expectations and I don't want to say rules, but the intent, right? What is the intent of the or the goal of the change, right? What information do you have? Spending enough time with the stakeholders and the leaders and the sponsors, and really understanding what their perceptions are about what's right and wrong about what you're trying to accomplish. Because sometimes you need to spend more time on the perception stuff than you do on the actual stuff. So spending more time at the beginning talking about those things, right, to separate perception from reality will give you a clearer path towards how you can implement the change. Otherwise, you're going to spend a lot of time circling back and making sure, is this still what you want? Is this what you were expecting? You don't want to have that whole unnecessary iteration if you don't have to. So, I mean, to me, that's one of the biggest areas we should be focusing on, because with a good understanding of those items, expectations, whatever constraints, even, you have a much easier time of enacting a change because everybody is aligned and on board, and you're not always having to do that.
Yeah, all that makes sense. That's good. I mean, yeah, alignment, I think, is definitely one of the biggest challenges, not just between, a leader and change agent, but with the rest of the organization.
Yeah.
That's often a big challenge for sure. Um, I'd like to get your perspective with respect specifically to aerospace defense program management. My impression has been that a lot of programs, because they're under such tight constraints, they don't like change. Like, they want a foundation. They want to know what the processes and methodologies are. They want to serve the IT stack and don't touch it because any change might threaten their ability to deliver on time, on schedule, on cost. Yet, but I guess the thing that is countering that is that we're in an age of big change, right? Whether it's AI or other things. I'd love to just get your general perspective on is that changing? Programs' attitudes towards change is changing or updating, and needs to continue to update. So you're in program and project management. We would love to get your perspective on that.
Well, to answer your end question, the answer is yes. And go back to the original, I'd say it's not that we don't want to change. It's that change is hard for a reason. When you're in a very regulated industry, right, change has to be made, I don't want to say difficult, but harder than in any other industry because people's lives are at stake. So it's very much safety first, always, safety always, right? There's certain non-negotiables. So once you understand that kind of box that you're in, right, we have no problem making changes. We love to make changes. We make tons of changes for various reasons, right? Whether it's a customer change, a driven change, something we choose to do, something in between, right? A joint effort, right? We have no problem making those changes, but they are made hard for a reason. So it takes longer. And sometimes that is the barrier to implementing it, is just the time. And sometimes it's, maybe the customer wants it quicker than we can deliver, or vice versa. We want to deliver faster than we can execute for regulatory reasons, or any number of challenges that we have when it comes to something that is so, safety critical, like an airplane engine. So that is a lot of it. There is, we are always looking for ways to implement, whether it's a design change, a manufacturing change, a performance change, a software change, anything. We're always looking for ways to make that faster, because we would love to bring in every tool possible. We do have to do the diligence, though, around things like
Yeah.
safety and cybersecurity and, millions of other things that we have to take into account and that not every industry has to.
Yeah. Totally makes sense. Yeah. Totally makes sense. Yeah. And yeah, it's interesting to continue to research that shift over time of how agile can you be and how much change can you accommodate? When is it justified? How much diligence do you need to invest in improving that out and so on? So good perspective there. The other side topic, maybe it's not a side topic, but big shift in the industry is, I guess, towards software defined things, right? So this idea that, yeah, you're gonna have a hardware platform, you kind of get that. Well, actually, let me back up for a second. What I see in a lot of startups at A&D is they try to get the hardware platform like settled, and they add new features over time with software updates. And that's a dramatically, I think it's a dramatically different model in terms of delivering capability from the program. So I'd like to I'd like to get your perspective there. Is that something that the whole industry is kind of shifting to? Is it just these newer startups? What are the pros? What are the cons? Would love to get your perspective there.
Um, well, I mean, I can't speak for other companies in the industry. I can speak to my experience that's kind of the way we've always done it because the hardware is harder to change than the software. Uh, from a just pure, it's the lead time on making a part different is a lot longer than changing the code. That doesn't mean it's any less rigorous or right over checked. It still has the same requirements. Lots of software requirements that have to, and things that need to be checked versus, hardware has its own set of checks and balances. It's just the pure lead time of making parts. So we always do try to use, if we can, changes to software to add features, because that is going to be the shortest way to do it. That's not just always possible, and that might not always be best for the whole system. So we still have to look at it from the system standpoint is, if we do this on a software chain, what's it going to do to the hardware? And are we pushing the hardware to a limit that maybe we can't sustain, right? It's all about, in this case, right, engines, it's a durable product. It needs to last 40, 50, 60 something years. So we're not looking to have disposable parts necessarily. We'd rather not. There are some that are considered consumable. Let's not get that wrong, but right, the overall engine is not something that is disposable. So we do try to manage how we change hardware to be most effective for the overall system, as well as the software. But sometimes in reality, the software is easier to change. And so we would default to that.
Yeah, good perspective for sure. Um, One other topic that is really interesting to me is I see a lot of primes and tier ones and so on they're trying to reconcile the development cycle of hardware with software, and they're very very different. They look very very different. Um, they develop at different rates, speeds, and trying to reconcile those together so you do get a system. It's Not everybody has figured it out, and I'd love to get your perspective on this about how do you, and I'm sure you've seen this from a project management perspective. How do you reconcile this? How do you get things to move smoothly? Do you have separate organizations and try to integrate at the end? Um, any wisdom there that you can share?
Yeah, I'd say, well, integrating at the end is probably the bad decision in general, because you don't have time to fix any problems. So and I would assume, like most of our, industry, you are doing that on a regular basis, right? You're integrating at various levels, right? Part to part, system to system, module to module, at all levels, you're going to be integrating. And the challenge, like you said, is when you have different lengths of development cycles, how to keep them sort of aligned or on track, which is hard to do, even not just between hardware and software, but just different types of hardware have different lead times, right? Stuff, externals on an engine are usually a much shorter lead time than a rotating part, a safety critical part in the center of the engine, or something that has to withstand high temperatures. And there's a various amounts of, a really large disparity of lead time. So you're always looking at that. The question is how to take the longest ones and make them shorter, because you don't want to take the short ones and make them longer, because that doesn't help. So, the one thing that I've seen change over the 30 years is the use of other, I'll say, manufacturing methods to get us quick an idea of what we're going to be doing, right? You no longer have to actually make a prototype part. You can make an SLA, stereolithography. You can make 3D printed. You can make it out of plastic. Like you can make it out of card. Make it out of anything you want if it gets you the idea of what you're trying to get across quicker. So, I mean, CAD modeling was the first step, right? Versus drawings. I remember having drawings in a drawer at my first job, and everything was a hand drawing. And then suddenly you can put it into a model in a computer, a 3D model. Great. I can make 3D models connect to each other and see how it works. But what about when I want to see, can I make it? I might be able to 3D print it now, or do an SLA or some other physical model that then I can take and give to somebody, give to an operator, give to an engineer. Is this really what you meant in your model? So that technology that has evolved and is now evolving into MBE and those things is been very valuable in shortening that development time, because you're not waiting for a supplier or your shop to make whatever you've designed for quote for real and give it to you to then realize that it's not what you wanted.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Good. I like that. So faster ways, and maybe not, exact parts, but something that is functionally similar that you can prove things out.
Sure. I mean, and that's the kind of the premise of Agile is, right? What's that minimum number of features you need to keep moving? So from a software standpoint, you're talking about software features. From a hardware standpoint, it might be hardware features or a interface or two, right? Maybe outside interfaces, and then you worry about inside ones later. Like there's ways to break it up so that you can keep making that progress, ensuring that that integration with all the other systems and components that you need are, you're having that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And if you change something, it might need to be, someone else might need to react to that.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. That's really, really good. Um, let's shift gears. I want to talk a little bit about software development competencies, and building that out, in a lot of companies that have been in aerospace defense for a long time have obviously primarily been hardware companies, right? So software competencies are relatively new to them. And I guess my question gets to a lot of long-standing companies in aerospace defense have really great competencies around hardware development. There's a lot of rigor around the process, the methodology, the IT tools, PLM, CAD, simulation, and maybe the software side of things is newer. How do you build out that competency? How do you mature it quickly so that you can not get an equal level, but something that is going to get the job done? I'd love to hear a little bit about that. How do you build that out and what that looks like?
Well, if I can answer that. Yeah, I don't know if I can answer that. That's not my background.
Okay. All right. Gotcha.
Well,
We can.
it would be unfair. It would be unfair to answer that. That's not for me.
All right. What about AI used for coding in software? It's almost like you can't have a conversation anymore without talking about AI. How about that? Is that something you're familiar with? You can talk to?
I just at a high level, I'm just like
Yeah.
everyone in industry, we're all looking at it and kind of figure out what's the right thing to do for the business, and for again making sure we are maintaining our safety and compliant regulatory compliance rules. There's lots of great stuff out there. We just can't pull it off a shelf in all cases and use it because of those restrictions. So it's a mixture between kind of the homegrown things that we're doing internally, homegrown, and externally. So it's a little bit of both, uh, being used to various levels in various parts of the organization. Some of it's just still in test mode. Some of it's being more widely used. Our partner businesses, or I'll say partner businesses, our other businesses in our RTX family, right, have different experiences, and we do try to share that as much as possible amongst us.
Okay. Great. Excellent. And I mean, you have a lot of domain expertise around project management, program management. Any insights into the use of AI there? I think the application is very different in software
Right.
development or other
Yeah, no, I mean,
domains.
there's definitely lots of uses on that side. That's kind of the, I'll say the quote easy stuff, right? Tracking action items and minutes and it's just a matter of, whether you have access to the right tools internally to do that. We, like most companies, we're testing out all the different tools. And once we get the okay to use them, we want to use them. Um, if I have a bunch of documents and I need to look at what are the differences between the two, you know, that's an easy use of LLM to say, tell me what the differences are. So I don't have to spend the time doing it and I can just check it. I would love to be able to just have a meeting and have AI listening and do the notes for me, you know, and I know that exists. We just, we don't have it necessarily deployed yet, but it's coming. And those are the kind of things that is
Yeah.
I'll say the quote kind of busy work for, project engineers that they could be spending that time doing other things, like really talking about problems and addressing issues and, not have to worry about the meeting minutes and notes, which are important to keep, but, sometimes tedious to generate and maintain, an action item list or, things like that. So, I mean, there's plenty of opportunity with the basic project type of thing,
Yeah.
whether it's building schedules, generating lists of things and lots of opportunity there.
Yeah. And I think that, what's really interesting to me is when I talk with the engineering folks about AI, they often almost immediately want to get to, okay, how's it applied to design or simulation or verification and validation? And I keep going back to how much time do you sit in meetings? How much time do you
Mhm.
spend looking at email? And to me, it feels like there's just a lot more headroom to realize some value there compared to this very specific, design and engineering oriented work. So I don't know if you have a perspective on that,
I tend
but
to agree. I think that's from a change manager perspective, that is the easier way to get people to adopt it, right? Given the simpler way to use it, the more personal day to day, right? Take the tedium out of your day to focus on the other more challenging work. And then you have people who are like, this is great. What else can I use it for? And then sometimes it makes the adoption of the more technical thing a little easier. Whether it's, requirements. I think we all know like translating requirements, right? From the customer down to the business, all the way to the piece part level, right? That takes time. So maybe, yeah, that would be a great use of AI, but you need the person doing it needs to know the right things about it in order to know if it's accurate.
Mhm.
But
Yes.
that's not that far removed from AI taking my meeting, listening to it, and making notes out of it. It's just
Right.
another next step from that.
Yeah, completely agree. And I think there's also even intermediate steps where it's like, okay, here's the NASA systems engineering body of knowledge document. Read that and grade my requirements. and let me know where it could be improved, right? I mean, not even have it write anything at all, just provide feedback.
Exactly. Yeah, I look forward to it being able to do comparisons, compare and contrast, find me differences, find me, little things that then I can look at and really understand and interpret rather than it spitting out something from me, go here. Like, I don't want it to just give me a here. I want it to say, here's what I'm seeing, a quote, essentially seeing in your maybe 2 documents or whatever, and then let me do the work because that's where the value is of me, my experience to say, you're telling me, this is what you're telling me, I agree or I don't agree, or, oh, I need to go look at that further because I didn't expect to see that difference.
Yeah, 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 completely agree. Yeah, and it's so interesting. Like, I think 6 months, a year from now, we will have learned so much. We will have tried so many things. Some of them will fail. Some of them will be spectacular successes, and yeah, we'll have a much better handle on things for sure.
Yeah,
Um,
things are changing fast.
Things are changing fast, absolutely. Um, I think I think I only have one more question for you, and it's the question that we asked everybody on the podcast, and it is, if you could redesign one thing in the world, even if it's the better mousetrap, what would it be? Um, it always takes someone a couple of minutes to like, okay, I need to think this through for a moment. Any
I
ideas?
would, I would change, or maybe not change, modify, I think is a better word than change. Modify the curriculum and expectations of first year engineers so that we don't lose so many in the pipeline. I have heard too many times in my career in various activities in and out of work about people who dropped engineering because they didn't do well the first year. And it hurts my heart because it's not that they weren't necessarily talented or could do it. It's just the concept of weed out classes or extra hard classes because it needs to be such an elite group of people. I don't agree with that. I think we have a lot of really smart people who would make amazing engineers and just never get past that first year. And that is disappointing. And it should not be a success criteria for a school or professor that they don't pass everybody or they don't, their average is a C. Like, to me,
Yeah.
I'm not, I'm not looking at grade inflation. I'm not looking for that, but making sure that the support system is there and the ability to ensure that anyone who wants to be an engineer can be an engineer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You know, yeah, I completely agree. That's a outstanding point. I think that the rigor and the meat grinder that is engineering school is like holdover from, I don't know, I guess the place we were 20, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, where, there were probably not enough engineering jobs for people to fill, right? So, but also, and if you look today, boy, we are short on the number of engineers in terms of openings. But also, I mean, people with engineering degrees go into so many different things. Like, I'm in research and publishing. I'm a mechanical engineer by degree. You are certainly working for a manufacturer, but you're in project and program management. Um, so it's just a wonderful degree with so many problem solving skills and capabilities that apply everywhere else.
Everywhere.
So
Yep.
yeah,
Every
yeah.
industry needs engineers. Every company has people who serve that function, whether they're called that or not. The amount of leaders in Fortune 500 companies who are engineers is pretty high. So it's a very versatile degree. And most people would agree it teaches you basic problem solving that, other degrees teach, but not all others degrees teach. And that
Hmm.
curiosity and that continuing to ask why, keep digging until you get to something better, and knowing when to say when, that it's good enough. All those skills that you learn as an engineer are applicable to so many other jobs and roles and things you could do in life.
There you go. Well, Jonna, thank you so much for coming on today. Really appreciate your time. Really great insights, and thanks for all your mentorship in the industry. I'm sure it means a lot to the folks that you work with and the people earlier in their career that are trying to figure out, how to navigate things. So, thank you so much. Really, really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Chad. This was great. Pleasure talking to you.